Welcome to the Morning Show studios today for WRCO. We have some friends in the studios on this rainy day. We're going to learn about Richland Resilience Group, and we're going to talk about what this is all about. In the studio, we have Darren Gudgeon, we have Connie Champnoise, also Brian McGraw, and Marty Richards is here, all a member of the group. Darren, you're an old veteran of the Morning Show. It's been a while. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too, Phil. It's been a long time. I used to try to pop in here during April and then June and then, EMS week, and then in the event we had a flood or two,
tornadoes,
tornadoes, and
things like that. Yeah, those low pressure situations.
Right, but now we're going to talk about something completely different.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. So tell me about the hat that you wear with this group, then.
So the Richland Resilience Group really started out back in 2022. So every county in the state, county in the tribal nations, develop what they call all hazards mitigation plan. And it's updated on a 5-year incremental basis, not necessarily every county's in the same cycle, but when the plan was developed, it goes for 5 years and then you do an update. And Richland County, we'd been into our third update, and Melissa Luck was the county board supervisor at the time, and she said, it'd be really nice to come up with a way to make this plan, this mitigation plan, become an actual working document where it's actually doing something rather than we're just checking a box and developing a plan. And so that's really where it started was how can we have these different ideas and strategies on how to mitigate against a flood or against severe weather or a power outage, but how do we get buy-in? How do we get some of these projects to actually move forward? And at the same time, we start talking about resiliency, which resiliency and mitigation, two different things. Mitigation is putting measures in place to try to mitigate or lessen an impact from a disaster. And resiliency is the disasters happen. How fast can you get back up and going from that disaster? And so the idea of this Richland Resiliency Group really came from that conversation between Melissa and Luck and I, and back in 2022, and then it just kind of took off.
It sounds like being proactive is kind of the whole goal, right?
It is, and I think throughout my career with Richland County, that mitigation plan, we did a lot of those projects. We redid culvert systems on Engine Creek Road in town of Henrietta. We did some stream work in Yuba along the Pine River. We did some relocation of homes and buyouts in Viola after flooding. The McKittrick or B house out on Highway 80 where the Lions, that house there was a mitigation project to get them out of the flood. The building we're in now was a mitigation project when the radio station was in the flood, way, moving you guys up here. And so we were active in that, but it really wasn't to the level that it could be if the community is engaged. And it can't always be just about mitigation. If a community is resilient, then they're going to bounce back quicker, and you have a better chance to keep them in your area. And instead of being hit by a disaster and then having to leave the community, they can stay because there's some resiliency built in. So yeah.
Yeah, people from all walks of life, even here in the studio today. So how did you kind of assemble the group here?
Yeah, so some of these folks I knew through working at the county level. Melissa had connections with Connie and others, so it was just kind of reaching out through that network of folks. We didn't really advertise, but it was just we wanted to get individuals from all walks of Richland County, so education, industry, concerned citizens, local government, tourism, county departments. And it's not a what's the term I want to use? It's not necessarily a formal, recognized committee. So we're not setting, we're not establishing policy. That's your municipality, your town boards and your city council and the county board's job. But this is really just getting people together that want to not talk about an idea in mitigation or resiliency, but to do a project that impacts how a disaster hits us or how fast somebody can come back from that. So we just reached out, and we've had a pretty consistent group of 11 to 14 people. We meet 4 times a year, and there's been a lot of work that's been done and still we're doing.
Do you report then to the county board?
Certain projects, certain project groups will then work with maybe a county committee or maybe somebody at the city council. So those individual projects where it really would take a policy group like the county board or the city council to, be engaged, then that would be where they report out. But otherwise, I don't know that we've done any other annual reporting out. That is something that we've been discussing, but a lot of energy has just been being put into getting projects done and things like that.
Okay. Brian McGraw is here. I understand first time on the show. Good morning.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us.
Great to have you. How are things in Eagle Township these days?
Eagle Township is doing well. Yeah, we've got a lot of road projects underway, and we're very busy.
That's good. Tell us a little bit about why you're a part of this group.
Well, I joined this group at the invitation of Darren, I believe,
yeah.
And my interests are in soil and water conservation, and that's the group that I became involved in. I'm anxious to see us implement practices that help conserve soil and improve water quality.
Well, the background in law that you have, too, that brings a lot to the table, I think, doesn't it?
It does. In my practice, I worked with municipalities a lot and became familiar with some of the regulations and rules that govern land use and water, protecting water.
So is Eagle Township, is that unique to, Richland County or different than any other towns around?
Well, I think we're all kind of the same, in the same boat. We have beautiful rolling hills. We've got some lands that are close to where the rivers are, streams, lowlands. We've got wetlands. And so Eagle is a good example of the rest of the county, especially we have some of the finest farmland in the county.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are some challenges?
Well, our challenges right now would be trying to protect the protect the areas that protect our water supply, the wetlands where the water seeps in and recharges. We have some challenges with using the manure that's generated in our livestock operations and seeing that it's spread responsibly and not overspread and causing contamination to surface and groundwater. We have challenges with respect to weather events. With the steep topography we have and the fast runoff, we oftentimes experience floods over our roads and other areas, and that presents a challenge in terms of maintenance of highways and other infrastructure that the municipalities have.
Some successes so far?
Well, some successes we implemented. We sat down and tried to look at things that we would like to see implemented. And we were successful in getting a lot of those incorporated into the county's comprehensive plan, which was adopted in January of this year.
Okay. So that's certainly there. And some goals? Do you set goals or, bring some things to the table?
We have set goals, and we're in the process of working on trying to get producer-led watershed groups set up in the county. And these are groups that are organized by farmers. The farmers determine what they want to try to accomplish within a watershed, and that watershed can be defined very narrowly as to a single creek or stream. It can be more broad, including every watershed in Richland County. And these groups, when they get set up, are eligible for some funding to implement certain farming practices that would help conserve soil, preserve the soil, increase the health of the soil, and also improve the quality of water.
Are there some educational opportunities in that as well for farmers?
There certainly is. We have had already 2 informational meetings for these producer-led groups. The last one was Tuesday, I believe, and it's an opportunity to bring producers together and see if there can be a core group that would like to set one of these groups up, and then they're able to choose from a whole menu of opportunities to plant cover crops, to get into studies that are being done by UW Extension or maybe the university on soil health and how best to preserve the healthiness of the soil, and other practices, trying to measure the benefit of implementing these practices and perhaps as cost reductions for the farmers over time as these practices are implemented.
Awesome. Sounds like you're making good progress. Connie Shamdoy is here as well. You are on the town board, I believe, aren't you?
I am not. I'm the citizen at large.
Citizen at large, okay. Well, good to have you in the studio.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live outside of, just about 7 miles west of Boaz on a farm, and we do not farm, but we have a nice setup. And my husband and I moved out here 20 years ago, and we have been very involved in local projects, and this one came up that I thought was really wonderful, to look at resilience here in our county, and I thought it was a good thing to spend my time on. And through that, I was put and tasked with groundwater, and that's very important to me, because I think, as Brian has said, it's our most precious, besides our soil, it is our most precious commodity here. You know, as you look at the rest of the country, many areas are in drought, lack water. We are not like that. We are blessed with good water, and the idea here is to preserve that and make sure that we are doing everything on top of the land that preserves the water underneath. So I'm very pleased to have joined it, and as Darren said, Melissa Luck was the one who asked me to be involved.
Mm-hmm. And you jumped to the chance then.
Oh, yes, yeah. Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and living outside the area, you know, had you been here before, or?
Well, you know, our family was from the Boston area, so I kind of knew the area, but when we would come up here to camp in the Driftless area, once you've seen the Driftless area, you just get hooked on it. And it's just such a beautiful part of the state.
So your goal is kind of preserve it for future generations.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So what are some challenges in your area and some things that you could talk about?
Well, what we're working on in the group is we're really trying to understand our baseline of where we are today on our groundwater. So, you know, what is the basis? Since two of the things that we're going to work on are well water testing and stream monitoring, but also we're going to develop, working with Southwestern Regional Planning Commission, a story map that'll explain and explore our groundwater vulnerability. So we'll have a document that can be shared with the community. And we are very pleased that we just learned we got a grant to test wells again here in Richland County. We did test in October 2020 and April 2021, and now we're going to test hopefully this year. And this is a grant that it's not coming out of the county's budget. It's a grant we got from UW-Madison to work with their team, one of their teams there, to develop well testing. So we're really excited about this. We just learned about it in the last couple of weeks. And as you know, we have about 4,100 wells in our county. So we've got quite a few to test. And so that's a big thing, because that'll give us a baseline, and then if we could do it over time, we'll see if there's been any changes to the quality of our well water. And it's free. And this is a nice thing. So people who are listening, if they're very interested in getting their well water tested for free, they should contact our group to do that. So that's kind of a nice benefit of this project. The other thing we did is we're having Wave Action Volunteers. That's coming up this Saturday, and that is a citizen science project where you pick a stream and you monitor it from like May to October, and it's once a month you go and monitor the stream in your area. So we don't want you to do the Pine or the Mississippi or the Wisconsin River, but a small stream in your area, and it's a nice project, and all that data that you collect then is put into the state database called SWIMS, so that it's used by DNR, UW Extension. They have this data that's collected by citizen scientists. And it's also fun for families with kids to get in the water and do the testing. So they look at the velocity of the water, they look at the depth of the water, the temperature of the water. And in the spring and in the fall, you look at the critters in the water. And the kids just love that with the little magnifying glass. They're looking at all these little bugs. And it's just a lot of fun. But it's also very helpful for the state to look at all these streams. There's over 500 volunteers statewide that do this, and it looks at about 600 streams. So all this data is helpful, again, as a baseline to look at how things are happening with the groundwater, because all of our streams are fed by springs which come out of the ground, and so we really need to stay on top of that. So that's what the two projects that we're really excited about, well, actually three, with the story map, the well water testing, and then the wave action volunteers. And this Saturday, May 3rd, there'll be a training session. And if people are interested in learning more about that, they need to contact Ben Johnson, and he's at valleystewardshipnetwork.org. So it's Ben at valleystewardshipnetwork.org. You can go online, talk to him, and he'll give you directions to the training this Saturday. It's at South Bear Creek. It's near Lafarge, and it's going to be a nice event. He'll provide all the equipment, Ben will, from Valley Stewardship, and he'll give you equipment if you want to do it for the whole year. He'll give you all the equipment. Again, free, fun, and I think a good service to our community.
What a great thing. You mentioned families. You could just get involved in that and have a little family science project.
Absolutely. And that's really what we're hoping people will do is, grandchildren or young couples with their kids, just go out there and spend once a month on a creek near their home and just get the kids involved in citizen science. And I think it's just really helpful for the children to be out in nature, and it's also really good for the state to get this data so they can track what's going on in our water.
What kind of things are in the kit that the tools you use?
Oh, you get a big net.
All right.
Yeah, to collect the critters, and you also get a big tube that looks at the clarity of the water. You get a kit for doing the dissolved oxygen, which is a little kind of chemistry test that you do. You'll get temperatures gauge to do the temperature. You'll get a book that shows you how to do everything, and you'll get it also gives you kind of a visual of what the critters look like, and all of these explain why these are important. So again, it's educational. So the kind of the visual on all of the animals or the critters in the water tells you if you have these bugs, your water's good. If you have these bugs, you got a problem. So it's a real good learning example. So all the materials are provided, all the written instructions, all of the materials you use during that whole testing time.
I hope a lot of people will take advantage of that.
I hope so. It's so fun. I've been doing it on our stream for 5 years, and it's just really fun to do it. And it's just it takes about an hour a month. Once you learn how to do everything and get kind of organized around it, it's about an hour, but it's lovely to do.
Have you seen many changes in the stream that you monitor?
I have not, and that's been good in a way, because our stream is pretty good. But no, it's been pretty consistent, and that's good for us. Mm-hmm.
Great. Mm-hmm. We're talking about Richland Resilience, and a great group of well-known people in the area and some good backgrounds. And then there's Marty Richards. Yeah. I'm not sure.
I saw that lead-in coming from a mile away. And I will say, when you asked Darren, how you selected who would be involved.
Yeah.
Some because of their expertise, some because of their knowledge, some because we should keep them off the street so they aren't bothering other people. So
is that where you come in?
That's where I fit. Right. Yep. So
why are you involved? Yeah. Or how did you get involved?
How in the world? Yeah. It sounded like Rosie saying something.
She did.
Really from my standpoint, and Darren can speak to this better than I can, we've had some very disruptive flooding to the tourism effort. Not in the last really, and I'm never going to take credit for this, not in the last 5 years I've been the tourism director, but I was around, and I remember moving a county fair. A couple times. There have been some real disruptive flooding that we've had. I'm going to put the test to Darren on this. The years, I want to say 2008 and 2013.
7, 8, 10, 13, 15, 16, 17, 18.
There were a bunch of them.
That's
there.
all? Okay.
That's all.
Wow.
So that's been a problem. And one of the things our group kind of figured out right off the bat, and the group as a whole, because there's the big group and then there are these individual groups, was we have no way of really forecasting what the stream flow is in Richland County. So if you go out to usgs.gov, which is the United States Geological Survey, and you look up water, just Google water and USGS, and it'll pop up a big map, and then you hit Wisconsin, you go into Wisconsin, there's this interactive map that you can see the river gauges that exist in Wisconsin that are reporting to that map. So for instance, the only one in Richland County, and really it's on the border, is down on the Wisconsin. And the value of that, you can go right into that map, click on it. And well, first, even before you click on it, you can see, is it green, red, or black? Well, black you're going to stay out of. Red, I'd stay out of that on the Wisconsin as well. But it gives you some different things. So you're going to learn, is it at flood stage, or is it high, or is it normal, or is it low? You get the height of the river and what normal height is. Current flow rate, which is important. The Wisconsin this spring's not been good. We've had a couple of situations where we've lost people on the Wisconsin within not too far from here. And it wasn't at that time at flood stage even. It was just the flow rate was such that it was dangerous. If you go onto that map, you can see that. And you can see, okay, is this a safe time for us to go? But even more so in Richland County on the Pine, with all the flooding issues we've had, that would have given us a little more predictability of what's happening, what's coming. And you've lived through it, Phil. I think you guys had to abandon ship and go up on the hill at least a couple of those times. And I don't know how that communication worked, but I'll bet it was a guess and by golly. How did that work without river gauges to tell you, whoa, we got to really do something here?
It was really institutional knowledge and yardsticks.
Yeah. We had a yardstick in the backyard that we kept watching it come up, and
but you weren't predicting it. You were just, it was basically the canary in the coal mine that when it got to a certain point, it's like, this is still coming, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
But you monitored upstream, like, Hub City area.
All the way to where Melanthon Creek and the Pine River meet. So we had yardsticks there. Our amateur radio club at that time, they would go out and then they record that if they could get to it, and then call that back in and say we're at this. And you could get some basic elevation data. It was very rudimentary. Yep. But then it was like, okay, now let's, where is it at 10 hours later, 12 hours later? But then the institutional knowledge that people had that have lived along that waterway really helped. But no,
if they'd lived there,
if they'd lived there, and over time, we lose that institutional knowledge, and it wasn't being put into a database. It wasn't being collected. It was, folks that had worked for the city street departments for 30 years were out by the flood control dike and, taking measurements. So,
So what we identified that as an issue now, because I know there were a couple of manual gauges that existed. Well, the people that used to maintain those no longer are around, and there's no one. It's kind of the job that existed in a municipality, and you weren't sure if it was a real job, and all of a sudden the person left and nobody filled it, and that's what's happened. Well, this is a real job because that helped predict what is happening with a heavy rain, because everything changes. Is the ground saturated or not? Or how many inches did you get in a certain period of time? Is there frost in the ground? So many things change. Well, with river gauge, you can, especially if you're connected with the USGS, today you can, if you live on the Wisconsin River, you can go out there and you can see okay, what's anticipated, because they're doing a forecast too. It's live time of what do we expect with what's upriver. And the Kickapoo River has several of those because they've had that experience for years and years. So the problem we ran into as we were looking, how do you become more resilient and deal with future issues, there is not an operating river gauge on any of our rivers in Richland County. And so our first discussion was, well, wait a minute, should we have river gauges? And I think everybody agreed, yeah, with our experience, we should. What's interesting, there is a river gauge, and so when I say operating, there is a river gauge that does exist that is in Rockbridge. However, that river gauge really is, again, it's a canary in the coal mine. It's not in the water. It's sitting in the stream bank in some weeds. And essentially, when water hits it, that is a signal to the city that, oh, you're getting a ton of water. You need to close your sluice gates on your dike. That's the only thing that it'll do if it's operating and working properly and connected properly, which we found there may be some concerns there. So we're really kind of in a word to use is unprotected state from trying to forecast what the Pine River is going to do. And I think anybody that's been around here for any number of years, that's a real concern. We've lost property damage because of that. Honestly, down Mill Creek, we lost a life because of a flood. And we really, that for us, for our group, that was an important thing that we needed to work at. And there have been a lot of challenges. And I'll say real quick, Susie Howery is the lead of our group, and she wasn't able to make it today, but she deserves a real shout out because she's kept us going, and she does a good job of documenting and really has done a nice job of keeping us going. John, and I always want to say his name wrong, Heinen? I said it right. All right. John Heinen is also, Darren and I are on that group, as well as Jason Glassbrenner are the members of that group. And so you've got a nice kind of a city-county blend that are aware of what's happening. And we have a lot of work in front of us. And I can share that, or I don't know if you're at break time, but you don't need commercials, right? This is all free. I'm sorry,
I think
Phil, the radio part of me kicked in. I'm like, we're 30 minutes in, Phil. Do you have to pay any bills?
Pretty soon. Why don't we just take that time out right now? That's a good spot in the program. Richland Resilience is the program subject, I should say. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back to our morning show on WRCO. Richland Resilience is the group in the studio today. Darren Gudgeon, Connie Champnoise, Brian McGraw, and Marty Richards all in the studio with us. And Darren, I know you formerly were here as the emergency role, and I remember talking to you many times, but we still get once in a while a flash flood, and I always wonder how much we should take that serious in Richland Center, because, flash flood, I have in my mind like water coming out of the hill and you're going to get washed in. Are those legitimate? I mean, and the Kickapoo River always floods and some of those, but how serious should we take those?
Well, I think, first of all, going back to what Connie had mentioned about the driftless area, it's a beautiful part of the state. And in my new role, I travel all over southwest Wisconsin now, working with the state of Wisconsin emergency management. But with the driftless area, we have such deep valleys, right? And there's steep runoffs, and what happens is we still have enough landmass to collect a lot of water. So during a heavy rain, it collects that. And flash flooding can be way more destructive than riverine flooding, because with a river flooding, if it's solely just over time rising and dropping, there is damage, but flash flooding is so much force with that water that comes down that it can really be disastrous. So it's just part of our topography and where we live. But I would take flash flooding very seriously anytime you hear there's a flash flood warning out.
Can you talk about your new role then?
Sure. So in November of 2023, I took a position with Wisconsin Emergency Management, and I have the entire Southwest region, so I have 13 counties that I support those county emergency managers with their training, their exercise, response, and recovery. So get to build upon my time with Richland County and share and teach and learn. I've learned a ton, just as much as I've shared as much. So it's been good.
Richland County is sort of unique, though, when you compare it to some of the other areas you go, isn't it?
It is. I mean, we're Richland County, Crawford, Vernon, those three counties in the southwest portion, and as you go into the west central part of the state, very similar in terms of population demographics, community size, land and terrain, lots of trout streams, lots of small rivers that feed into both the Wisconsin and eventually into the Mississippi, and it's a jewel. I really think that the Driftless area is one of the crown jewels of Wisconsin, next to the Green Bay Packers. There isn't anything better, right? But with this, there are similarities as my region goes farther south into Grant and Lafayette, Greene, and Rock. A little bit different. We have farmland here, but there is a lot of farmland in Lafayette County, a lot of farmland in Greene County, but very similar in what drives the community. A lot of small town feel, other than Madison being, our state capital, is most of my region are small towns, small communities. So.
Marty touched on river gauges. Are those becoming more of a reality in our area too?
And recently I've had some other communities, Reedsburg, and then going into Monroe County, Vernon. There's been a lot more river gauges being installed because it's really the only way that you can get data on the volume of water coming through, data on the flow and height. And going back to what Marty was talking about, when you look at the system on the Wisconsin River, all of the tourism companies that are along the Wisconsin River, they utilize those gauges to be able to tell what's the flow coming out of Petenwell, what's the flow coming out of the Kilbourne Dam, what's the river height, because when it's peak, they let their people know. It really drives their business. We're not letting any boats out on the water today. When it's optimal, they'll just really hammer the marketing to get as many people out on the river as they can. And the best way to be able to do that is knowing what the river's conditions are. So, I was just looking at river conditions last night. My phone went off, and we're now back in flood stage on Petenwell and the Kilbourne Dam. And fortunately, a life was lost below the Kilbourne Dam, 2 lives recently. So we have tremendous water and waterways in our state, particularly in this area. They're beautiful to explore. It really is a treasure. I mean, we need clean water to be able to consume for ourselves, but then just to be able to explore some of these waterways. The river gauges would give the decision makers here in Richland County data, and when I say decision makers, not just in terms of flood, but in terms of sunny day. If you get businesses that really want to take advantage of the Pine River, how awesome would that be, where they could say our river depth and flow has been at this. We're just going to really market it as much as we can to get people out and enjoy it.
Does it matter where you put the river gauge at?
Yeah, I mean there is some science to it. We have over the years we looked at different locations. 2008 we did have some funding for river gauge systems in 2008, but that was 7 and 8 were back to back really significant flood years for us countywide, and so we got some dollars to put in the river gauges, but we also had a lot of homes that were impacted, some major, some destroyed, and so we really had to, where do our dollars go, our mitigation grants go, and so we opted, and I would do it again today, we opted to help get more families get their homes either moved or get them out of the floodway than that, but there's more communities that are putting them in, and I think they see the value in having them.
Brian, when Marty and I were growing up, our dads, ran farms, and they were aware of watersheds and things like that. But farming has really changed since those things. There are more challenges now, aren't there?
There certainly are. We're trying to encourage adoption of certain practices that will help slow down the runoff of water and nutrients that are in the soil, and trying to get a a mechanism for encouraging producers to adopt these practices or at least experiment with them.
Mm-hmm. Things are, I think, often changing, aren't they?
You look at the way farming was done 30 or 40 years ago, yes, it's a whole different ballgame. The farms are much bigger now, and there's fewer of them, but the number of animal units have remained fairly constant over that period of time. But then you have the large producers concentrated in one area, and then they have this manure that they need to get distributed. So yeah, you see the trucks going by my house in the spring, and there's 500 semi-loads going to a certain area, and they're spreading liquid fertilizer. That's quite a bit different than what was done 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. They have a lot of regulations on that.
They do, especially for the big producers. Absolutely. They have to have soil tests done before to see if the land is going to be receptive to that quantity. They put on what the soil tests say they need, and they use certain techniques to get it into the soil. Some producers do. They knife it in.
Yeah, most definitely. It is a changing world, Marty, in terms of agriculture, isn't it?
Yeah, I remember in the mid-'70s, we were just a groundbreaking farm that my dad and myself as a kid, when we first started hauling liquid manure, we were one of the first in the county, and people just looked at us like, "You're doing what?" It was baffling to them, and we were only milking 200 cows. Well, there's no such thing as a 200 cow herd these days. You're either 40, you're really specialty, artisanal, really marketing your own product, or you're over 1,000, and that's the profit margin and things like that. I think one thing we need to make sure we mention, all of everything we're talking about today wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Ellen Tyler at Southwest Regional Planning. Ellen really got the ball rolling, I think, once Darren and Melissa had their discussion. Ellen really got the group together and kept it going, and really has been a motivator, I know for me, to keep meeting and keep pushing the ball. And in the river gauge group, it's tough because probably the first 8 months it was a research project. We were just trying to figure out, we thought there were 3 gauges. Well, no, there's really one, and it's not even in the water. So, so that was just learning that, and then learning, okay, what kind of gauges are out there, because we learned, well, there's manual gauges, and they do work, but somebody's got to man them, and it's not lifetime reporting, and, it's not going to catch all the data that you really need, and it's not going to warehouse it. It's not going to forecast. They're more affordable, but you got to have somebody committed that they're going to keep checking that, kind of like Connie checking her stream all the time, once a month, right? At least. Well, okay, we can go to a digital that automatically uploads and reports. Well, that's, to buy one of those gauges is probably a $12,000 investment. And then that's just the gauge. So now you have to have a reporting software commitment or agreement and a maintenance agreement to get that information on USGS so people can use it. Well, that's another, probably $10,000, we'll say roughly. So that's our battle right now, is trying to figure out, okay, this is a lot of money that doesn't exist. There used to be some grants for that. Now, maybe not as much. I know National Weather Service was helpful in educating us a little bit on this. Well, National Weather Service doesn't have the funds they used to have as either, and that was a fast drop off for them. So, and this is important to me in many ways. I live on the Willow still, and the Willow's pretty manageable. Kind of like you had said, Darren, yes, you get flash floods, but really the Willow, you can see it coming. But I've lived on it all my life. So if you're up at Lloyd and all of a sudden there's water over the road up by Lloyd and one of the town roads, it's like, oh, this is gonna happen. And we've had some. It was 1997, 94, I think it was. We had a big. Their water had come up from New Orleans. There was a hurricane. It came up, and that was a big one for us. It was getting close to Highway 58 by us, and that's a mile up from Ithaca, so that's a big deal. But not just the flooding. For me personally, last year we had some early flooding early in the spring. I get these young men with a pickup and 2 kayaks in the back of the truck, and it had receded below the banks. Well, they said to me, they stopped by the visitor center and said, "Hey, do you think it's safe to go kayaking?" Well, my first career was my second or third career was in insurance, right? Personal insurance. So my insurance brain kicked in, and I said, "Heck no. That is not safe." And then they said, "Well, we're pretty experienced and we know what we're doing." And I said, "You know what? I'm still giving you the heck no," because simply I had no way of knowing. I could go over to Old Mill Pond Park, take a look at it. I could have taken Darren's measuring stick, but I don't know what I'm measuring it against, right? And the rapids are there, so it still looks like, it's pretty good flow. So we have no idea. And that's one of the hazards in my position. And I've learned, of course, take the very cautious approach. And now we're getting into that season, and the ground has gotten some rainfall. So I'm in a precarious position to where, fortunately I did sell personal lines insurance there for a while, so I got all the disclaimers of, okay, I'm not an expert, and I didn't even sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. But with caution, you probably could have an enjoyable kayak today, or no, I'd really stay off from it, because one of the hazards people don't think about if you haven't kayaked the Pine. It's a narrow river with a lot of down trees. And I know a lot of the kayakers that come like that, because how it's been maintained in the past and how I expect it'll continue to be maintained. When those trees go down, they're big trees, they're old trees, they are an obstacle. And experienced kayakers love that because there's no rapids. So the thrill on the Pine is to being able to navigate. And so you leave part of that tree in the river. The problem is when you have a high flow, and we've had some problems with this in the past, and you have folks, even if they're experienced, and they get on the wrong side as they're approaching, and they'll get caught on that down tree, and it'll start to tip the kayak, and now they're going into the water caught under the kayak and the tree. And so that can be a dangerous situation. And river gauges for us would help us if we had one at Rockbridge, because that's the northernmost point that we would ever have kayakers on commercially, is to be able to know, okay, is the flow in a range that, this is regarded as safe. We're not making any warranties, but just much like on the USGS map, they're just kind of giving you a range, and it's your information to use, and just do with it what you will. But if we're flood stage, just stay out of it, because that's bad news.
What's interesting is we haven't had the winters that we used to have, and you talked about high water in Lloyd. That always meant we had to go fix fence down in the bottom because it was washed out every spring.
There's a tree come through and take half the fence out.
Take half the fence. You don't have to worry about that quite so much anymore. Yep. Connie, did you want to speak on that?
I did. And just following up on what's coming up next is, again, to remind everybody that Saturday, May 3rd at 10 o'clock, there will be wave stream monitoring at South Bear Creek. I guess that is near Lafarge. And if you want information, you can contact Ben Johnson at Valley Stewardship Network. His email address is ben@valley-stewardshipnetwork.org. And let him know you're coming, get directions from him, and any questions you have about what will happen that morning. So, again, a nice, fun morning for your family.
Sounds like it. What is the time frame then? You said it's Saturday. Is there a time there?
10 a.m.
10 a.m., okay.
10 a.m., yes. May 3rd at 10 a.m. And like I said, the weather looks good for this weekend. So it might be a nice outing for your family. You can learn a lot of things. And Ben is a fun guy to work with. So you'll have, I think, a very nice morning.
Indeed. Mm-hmm. And the rain out there, the high water, you don't need a rain gauge to drive by and say, I don't see a sandbar in the Wisconsin, Darren. The water must be up, right?
Right, yeah. Right now the Wisconsin is really high, so you're not going to see any sandbars.
Right.
Once the water comes down, all those sandbars shift. So it's another thing to be concerned about if you're out on the water. Mm-hmm. So
and the Wisconsin's really weird for us because we hit a drought. We were in a bad spot earlier this year, and I know people see me driving around the county and think he's just putting windshield time in. He's not doing anything. But, I do check some things, and I'll never forget, it was a month ago when we hadn't gotten all this rain. I went down and checked the Gotham Buena Vista boat landing, and that whole thing was underwater. And so you have to think about that for a minute. Okay, we're in a drought situation, but the Buena Vista boat landing is completely underwater. Well, that northern flow, they had a lot of rain north of us, and I know Petenwell's been they've been a little concerned.
There's more coming because of this last storm too.
And Petenwell draws down their lake every year in the winter. We've been out there ice fishing, and it's like, everything's cool, and all of a sudden you hear ice popping, and a week later you come back and there's a shelf of ice. So that's taken a lot of water on already, and Castle Rock too. So for us, don't always rely on what your weather is when you're thinking about, the Wisconsin, because it's going to get affected by whatever has happened north of us.
Think about water and your role as tourism. What it means to tourism in Richland County. It's incredible, isn't it?
Well, the trout fishing here.
Right.
We're Saturday is opening day for where you can keep inland trout. And we've seen a lot of folks out on the bridges already. And I have people in short-term rentals. They love short-term rentals if they're fishermen. That's really their stay. They're not real excited about a hotel room. So, that is an important part of our business in Richland County. And I know some guys will see those Illinois license plates at the bridges, but you know what? They're coming here for a reason. We have folks that come here from out west to go fishing here. And I always know if they're not a local, because they'll talk to me, they'll come into the visitor center and start talking about fly fishing. And I said, you haven't fly fished, or you haven't fished much around here, have you? And they're like, well, no, not really, because it's so much different here. If you talk to the veterans that are really good trout fishermen, they'll tell you about fishing the depth of the hole, because they go there where it's cool. And also, if you try to fly fish in a lot of our bigger streams here, you're going to fight the trees. Yep. And you're snagging. And I met a fella that I talked to, at the beginning, and then talked to him after. And I said, you're really going to want to get some spinners and then work the bottom of those holes. And he said, I don't know. I caught this and did this. And he's from Wyoming. And I fished in Colorado and blah, blah, blah. And okay, awesome. Good luck. I hope you do well. And then he came back in a day later. He goes, okay, what were you talking about with these spinners and fishing the holes? And I said, how many snags did you have? And he said, well, I've lost some fishing line. That's all I'll say.
Got to climb a tree to get a lure back.
Exactly. But yes, you're absolutely correct. We are the Richland County and Greater Richland area is very well known nationally for excellent trout fishing.
Great subject here today. Darren, what's next for the group here?
Well, I think, we're going to continue, the group will continue to meet, and as other ideas, that's the beauty of this group, is that there's people from all walks of life. I mean, from, just concerned citizens to business owners to government officials. And they're all just, the thing they have on their mind is just, how can we make Richland County be resilient? And tying this all together, because we've talked about some mitigation things, we've talked about disasters, and we've talked about water and soil. To tie all that together, for Richland County to be really resilient, you have to start at what I'm going to just say is foundation. And so everybody needs clean water, right? And so if we all have access to clean water, both industry and families and farms, that helps us sustain us. Same with our soils. If our soils are healthy, then our producers can produce. Our farms will be better off, and the generations down the road will be too. And then with the river gauge, that really is a way of not just public safety, but really marketing the Pine River. And all three of those together really do make Richland County more resilient, because it's improving our quality of life. It's bringing people here because we have clean natural resources, and we have engagement from all partners of the community. So what's next? I think on our table, we do want, our group is going to be visiting Weston School, and they have the sheep producing up there. So that was kind of cool. And so one of our emphasis, I think, going forward is with this, just getting engaged with the school districts, because there's so many school districts that are doing so many things to really set the youth up. I think of some of the industrial, I'm going to use industrial arts that's going on at Ithaca School, giving kids education opportunities that will really set them up for future. That will make Richland County more resilient as well. So.
If the listeners are hearing this, interested in it, and want to give input or whatever, what's the best way to do it?
The best way would be you can reach out to anybody that's on the committee here locally. So Marty Richards is an active part of the group.
Call him. Yeah. Just call him.
Especially if you have a beef.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
You could reach out to the local emergency management office. You can speak to them. They can get you connected. UW Extension plays a role in this. And then just be watching. The one thing we're going to be doing more of is I think really sharing with the public as a whole the things that are going on. And we've got an event coming up, and if we've got time, I'm going to let Brian speak about it, but we have an event coming up it is open to the public.
Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, that's on June 20th, and it's at the Franks Hill. It's owned by the Three Eagles Foundation. We're having an opportunity for people to come, and we're going to do some work projects that we have in June, which will be a lot of fun, and we'll have tour of the area and some explanation of what it means and what it's all about. And then we'll have a meal later in the morning. And so we encourage anybody that wants to come. And if they want information about it, they can feel free to call me. Cell phone number if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's 608-778-2260. And if I don't answer, leave a message and I'll call you back, and we'll get anybody that wants to come.
They have a lot of fun things at Franks Hill. The Equinox, I know they view those and do some other things.
And that will also be the June 20th date is also the Equinox.
Right. Good. All right. Marty, one more thing.
I think a point of connection for folks that do seriously have interest in maybe the work event or different things. I have those, and we'll have future events on the tourism website on our calendar of events. So if they go to greaterrichlandtourism.com, you'll see what other events are happening, and then also they can reach out and connect if they had questions through the website as well. So
very well.
That'd be an easy way to connect.
Great. Well, thanks for all that you guys do. Nice to learn about the group today. Richland Resilience, our subject on today's morning show.